The desert ahead looked like a sheet of hammered copper. Heat shimmered over the dry wadi system, distorting the ridgeline until it bent and rippled like water. Rachel kept the Apache low, skimming just above the rise and fall of the terrain, her eyes scanning far more than the landscape. She watched the curvature of the land, the way a hunter watched the tension of the bowstring. There was a convoy out there, buried under camouflage netting and a false sense of surprise. The Marines had it in sight. Now it was on her to make sure they stayed alive long enough to do their job. Her hands moved without needing to think. The cyclic control rested steady under her left palm, while her right thumb traced a short arc over the targeting controls. Weapon systems were green. Fuel was acceptable for the window they had. Ammunition was full. That last part wouldn't stay true for long. She glanced sideways. Her co-pilot and gunner, Stork, was peering through the optical sight like he was already halfway into the fight. "You know, I've got a good feeling about this one," he said, tapping the side of his helmet twice. Rachel didn't reply at first. She made one more trim adjustment on the collective before answering. "You said that over Barak Ridge. We came home on one engine and 30 rounds. "Exactly, and we came home." The static on the command frequency crackled again, a thin reminder of the signal degradation over the basin. Higher command had repeated the same thing 3 times. Convoy located. Marines in position. Tight window. Move fast. Confirm effect on target. No delays. The last part came with a clipped tone that sounded more impatient than cautious. Rachel had flown long enough to recognize the kind of voice that hadn't been outside the wire in a while. She let Stork finish the last visual check on their approach while she reviewed the terrain map one more time. The wadi was wide and dry, flanked on one side by eroded sandstone ridges and on the other by a sun-scorched ravine that might pass for cover if you were desperate enough. The enemy convoy had taken a wide berth around the main road to avoid satellites, but that isolation worked both ways. Once engaged, they wouldn't get quick help. Of course, that went for her and the Marines too. Wind buffeted the canopy lightly as she banked left, angling into a shadow line from the hills. The Apache responded with clean, almost silent tension. She didn't think of it as a weapon. It was a scalpel, the kind of tool you only used when you knew exactly where to cut. Stork shifted, adjusting his harness. "What's the rule again?" "Aim for the node. Disrupt the line." Rachel nodded. "Always hit the comms first, then mobility, then firepower." Command tone returned over the net. Firmer this time. "Strike Team Bravo. You are 1 minute to mark. Confirm eyes on." Stork responded for them. "Blade 1 is inbound and visual. Holding low. Call it clean." They were 10 seconds out from their first waypoint when Rachel caught the faint dust trail to the east. Just a wisp on the edge of the map. Could be wind. Could be a second convoy. Could be something worse. She didn't bring it up. Not yet. Her eyes stayed locked on the route line overlaying the terrain in her mind. Every second had already been run 100 times before wheels left tarmac. Now it just had to unfold in order. Comms vehicle is your first, middle of the line. Try to catch it when they're pivoting at the fork. "Copy that. You want the lead truck or the tail?" "Lead. If they lose their nav, they'll stall." Stork smiled faintly. "Love it when they stall." Rachel made one last check. Altimeter steady. Engine temp within limits. Wind holding. Her left hand pressed the cyclic down another fraction of an inch. They slid behind a slope, just beneath radar line, 200 feet above baked earth that hadn't seen water in a year. She exhaled once and didn't blink. The Apache held firm, quiet and waiting, its rotors pulsing low like a heartbeat under tension. Far below, the Marine recon unit was already in place, waiting to hit the ground hard once the convoy staggered. She didn't know their names, only the call sign, but their safety was tied to hers now. If she missed the shot, they'd pay the price. If she moved too slow, they'd get surrounded before exfil. Stork adjusted the gun alignment again, still half joking. "You know, You never talk before we hit the line. Other pilots, they chatter. You just breathe and break bones. Rachel didn't look over. Her eyes stayed forward, locked on the jagged cut of the ravine's approach path. We'll buy them minutes, she said. That's all we ever get. The convoy came into view in pieces, shapes sliding into focus between the heat shimmer and the sand-colored netting stretched over the vehicles. From this angle, Rachel saw the length of it 8 trucks in total, stretched along a natural bend in the dry wash. The comms vehicle was second from the front, barely distinguishable but for its oversized antenna folded tight against the roofline. The lead truck had a mounted gun, high angle, manned. The last vehicle, larger and armored, likely held rear security or heavier equipment. Rachel steadied the Apache behind a sloped ridge, dipping low until the hill partially masked them from the convoy's forward view. Her voice was calm as always, even in this moment of pure timing. She marked the center node first. Target locked. Comms vehicle. Send it. Stork didn't hesitate. The chain gun spat a burst that looked soft from above but sounded like tearing metal through the belly of the sky. The rounds chewed through the thin canopy and ripped into the vehicle just as it lurched into the bend. Smoke jetted from the side door. A figure spilled out, rolling over gravel before disappearing behind the wheel well. Rachel pitched forward and triggered her first hellfire. It dropped clean and curved hard, slicing into the lead truck and lifting it sideways into the air. Flames coiled up from the cabin before it even landed. The rear vehicle slammed brakes and started to reverse. But Stork had already pivoted the turret. Another burst, sparks, and a pop. Then the whole truck jolted and sagged left. Ground radio lit up. Blade 1, this is Reaper Actual. Convoy hit. Engaging now. Rachel responded without needing to adjust. Copy. Reaper. We're overhead. You've got cover. From her angle, she watched the Marines rise from the earth. They seemed to grow from the sand, unfolding from behind berms and camouflage netting strung between the rocks. Movement was fast, clean, rehearsed. They surged forward in fire teams, bounding from cover to vehicle, securing the smoking wrecks and pushing into the middle of the convoy to seize cargo and electronics. 2 Marines were already at the comms vehicle, pulling gear out and tossing it into a waiting all-terrain truck. Everything was timed. Stork adjusted elevation. Do you want me to clip that side group? Rachel studied the 3 figures sprinting away from the smoking rear truck. No, save ammo. They're running. A small, technical, half-covered in camo mesh, pulled away from the far edge of the convoy and accelerated east. Rachel marked it instantly. Runner. Get its tires. Stork fired a short burst tight, fast. The rounds kicked up dust, then struck just under the front axle. The vehicle fishtailed, rolled once, and came to a sharp, uneven stop against a low rock outcrop. Rachel circled, adjusting altitude. The Apache moved clean, responsive under her touch. From this angle, she could see the Marines tossing crates into the back of their vehicle convoy, moving fast, but not sloppy. She checked the ridgeline to the northeast and spotted movement. Dust. Not drifting, but rising in straight, engine-driven lines. Multiple trails. She adjusted her visor to reduce glare. 3, maybe 4 distinct dust columns, 1 vehicle at least with mass, possibly an armored car, reinforcements, fast. Her voice stayed level. Multiple contacts inbound, distance unknown, direction northeast, possible side trail. Keep eyes sharp. Copy that, Stork said, dialing his optics back to a broader field. Rachel was about to call it in when the warning tone screamed through her headset. Lock on! Her HUD lit red, an angry bracket flashing near the upper right. Her reflexes snapped in faster than thought. She banked hard left and dove. The tone spiked. Missile, she said, already punching flares. Behind them, the sky cracked. A sharp white trail cut upward from a rock formation, then bent suddenly as the flare caught its eye. The missile passed just above their rotor and detonated near the ridge, showering the wash in a dust cloud. Chunks of rock bounced off the tail boom. Rachel felt the thud in her spine, but the controls stayed live. Still flying, she confirmed, low and calm. Stork checked the systems. We're good. Minor shrapnel right side. Nothing major. Rachel leveled them out, keeping low to the terrain now, scanning every outcrop for a second launch tube. That first one had come from a narrow rock stack near the old trail, too small to park behind, but just large enough to conceal one person with a launcher. They hadn't seen it until it lit. She radioed down. Reaper actual. Blade 1 just took anti-air. Origin was southeast ridge, low angle, no visible reload. Watch for more. Copy. Blade. We're accelerating exfil. Packages secured. ETA 4 minutes to vehicle movement. Rachel swept the flight path again. The enemy reinforcements were closing in fast, still out of range, but dust patterns suggested they were pushing hard. They'd hit the Marines if the convoy didn't move soon. She double-checked her fuel. Still in range. Ammunition. Count Hellfires down by 1. Chain gun sitting at 80%. Stork, next strike window will be northeast ridge. I want to slow their line before it curves down into the basin. Got it. Set and ready. She took a longer breath and repositioned. The Apache glided sideways behind another low rise, hiding its profile. From here, the battlefield looked like a chessboard. Every move forced now. Marines below were loading as fast as they could, but they were still exposed. Rachel blinked twice, clearing the flash residue from the warning light. Her HUD flickered briefly, then reset. The clean, sharp lines were back stable, defined, but the margin for error was already fading. The tone in her voice stayed even, but her thoughts were sharper now. They had hit hard. Perfect timing. Clean strike. And still, it wasn't enough. The enemy was adapting, shifting, closing. The convoy was damaged, yes, but not neutralized. And now the Marines were out in the open. Marines were out. She kept the Apache low, swinging back over the battlefield one more time, then adjusted bearing toward the incoming trails. Time to make space, she said. Rachel rolled the Apache hard to the right, following the slope of the terrain as the dust trails from the east flared wide. These weren't support vehicles. She could see weapon mounts, turrets, crew leaning out the windows with launch tubes. 5 trucks minimum, and they weren't slowing. The lead vehicle punched over a low ridge and dropped into the dry creek bed, angling toward the Marines' exfil route. If they got close enough, they'd split the column and box them in before the Marines could move. Her voice stayed flat. Second convoy entering from east. They're fast. First contact in less than 2 minutes. She reversed pitch, brought the bird up just enough to get a clearer shot over the ridge. From above, the reinforcements looked like a fist driving toward the softest part of the Marines' position. Rachel fired. The chain gun raked across the first 2 vehicles. One swerved, slammed into a low berm, and flipped. The second burst into flame and rolled to a stop with its rear tires still spinning. Then the second missile came. The launch flash was quick, barely more than a blink. The lock tone hadn't even finished its rising scream before the Apache shook like a kicked drum. The explosion didn't hit them directly. It struck just off the right nose, close enough to shatter the front viewport and send a wave of jagged shards through the cockpit. Warning lights blazed across the HUD. The bird rocked sideways and dropped nearly 20 feet before Rachel caught it. Next to her, Stork gasped. Rachel glanced over. Blood was already soaking through the shoulder of his flight suit. His head was tilted back. Eyes squeezed shut for a second before he grit his teeth and forced them open again. His right arm lay useless in his lap, the harness smeared with a fine mist of glass and sweat. I'm good, he lied through his teeth. Keep flying. Rachel didn't argue. She leveled them out, kept altitude low and steady, then scanned the controls. Gun alignment was off. Weapon targeting had defaulted to her console. Stork's station was effectively dead. She reached across with her left hand, pulled the backup override, and brought both systems under her control. Flight, weapons, countermeasures now all on her. Stork tried to move but winced hard. You've got it. Rachel's voice didn't change. "I've got it." The radio flared again. Marine voices, fast and clipped, heavy breath between words. "This is Reaper. Actual, we're pinned. Second element is flanking from southeast. We've got wounded." She could hear the shift in background noise, automatic fire close enough to cut through the radio's filters. Rachel banked left and dropped altitude again, pulling the Apache into a tight arc behind the smoke trails of the destroyed trucks. She came in low and fast, barely clearing the crest before loosing another short burst of cannon fire at the rear enemy vehicle. It skidded, twisted, and jackknifed across the trail, blocking the others for a few seconds. "Blade 1 engaging," Rachel said over the net. "Continue movement. I'll cover your 6. One of the Marines shouted over the net. Not to her directly, but audible enough to register. Where the hell did these guys come from? Rachel knew the answer. The terrain had masked their approach. The trail had been marked as defunct in the briefing. But nothing in the desert stayed dead for long. The enemy had adapted, moved fast, probably tracked the first strike and guessed the fallback route. The ground commander's voice cut in again. "We can't hold this position more than 5 minutes. Repeat, 5 minutes and we have to roll or we're boxed." Rachel's fingers moved across both control sticks now, thumbs shifting the weapon selector while her other hand adjusted rudder trim. The Apache whined in protest. Too much maneuvering, too little margin left. The shrapnel hit had weakened the bird's response, but it was still flying, and that was all that mattered. She flew a fast S pattern across the Marines' line, drawing fire away from their loading zone. Bullets tracked her shadow across the sand, but she kept moving, squeezing off short bursts at likely enemy positions. She didn't have time to confirm hits. It wasn't about clearing the field. It was about disrupting the pace, delaying the collapse, stretching 5 minutes into whatever they could survive. Stork shifted again and groaned. "You're flying like a damn surgeon." Rachel didn't answer. She adjusted the elevation, felt the Apache vibrate under strain, and reset her grip. One hand on each stick now, weapon systems flickering back to ready, her own breathing slow and steady, measured against the movement of targets across the terrain. She caught the shadow of a third group approaching, smaller, faster motorbikes maybe, or modified pickups, closing from the far northeast edge, likely trying to cut off the Marines' escape. There was no time to engage directly. She'd have to get creative. Maybe draw them off with misdirection. Maybe force them to reposition by collapsing the terrain near their path. The Marines were almost loaded. She saw the lead MRAP shift into gear and start crawling forward, wounded or not. They were moving. Rachel dropped back into the ravine line and pulled a tight roll around the outermost bend, keeping low and tight. The controls pulsed under her hands. She checked Stork one last time. He was conscious, pale, jaw clenched. "You're done for now," she said simply. "Let me work." He nodded once and didn't speak again. The Apache rose back over the ridge and swept into position between the Marines and the encroaching technicals. One hand gripped the flight stick. The other hovered over fire control. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It only needed to hold the line long enough for the convoy to disappear over the horizon. She didn't wait for orders. She watched the clock in her head. Then she said it, not to the Marines, not to command, just to the sky in front of her. "Then you get 5 minutes, not a second more." Rachel hovered the Apache just above the low crest of a broken ravine, eyes tracking the movement below like she was playing a quiet game of chess with her life on the line. The terrain sprawled beneath her in tones of rust and ash, every dry gully and ridgeline etched with the faint language of tactical possibility. She saw the enemy's shape and how they moved. In the dust they raised as they pushed toward the Marines' retreat path. The first wave had been delayed. Barely. The second was still coming. Better armed. With Stork slumped quiet in the right seat, bleeding but stable. Everything now sat in Rachel's hands. Flight controls, weapons management, navigation, communications. She didn't waste time thinking about it. One system at a time. One threat at a time. The Apache hummed steady under her boots, strained but obedient. The onboard targeting computer flickered once, then recalibrated. The last Hellfire was still queued but hadn't been fired. It blinked softly in the corner of her HUD. Waiting. She angled toward a natural choke point just north of the Marine convoy's fallback route. A narrow pass between two crumbling ridgelines offered cover and danger in equal measure. If she collapsed the trail at the right moment, she could trap any vehicle trying to cut across. She marked the base of the rise, switched to the cannon, and fired a short burst into the dirt wall. The rounds bit deep and sent a sheet of sand and rock sliding across the road. Not enough to stop a full push, but enough to make them slow. That was the goal now. Delay. Disrupt. Force the enemy into pauses. Every pause meant a few more feet for the convoy. A few more seconds. Blade 1. This is Reaper Actual, came the voice over the net. Tighter now. We are mobile. All units rolling. We've got 2 vehicles with wounded. Movement slow. Rachel responded immediately. Copy. I have your movement. Eyes on both flanks. You keep moving. I'll keep the heat off you. She pushed the Apache forward again, keeping just above treetop level. The aircraft's engines strained in the dry heat, and the warning lights on her dashboard pulsed with quiet urgency. Fuel was burning fast, and with the added load of controlling weapons solo, her margin for error had vanished. She stayed low along the ravine, angling to intersect the second enemy group coming down from the far northeast. This was the fast group's smaller vehicles, no armor, but quick and likely carrying more anti-air. Her left hand adjusted throttle while her right manipulated the fire control interface. The targeting reticle hovered over the lead vehicle faster, larger, probably command for the unit. Rachel locked in. The Hellfire cube blinked steadily, waiting for confirmation. She waited. Not yet. Let them come closer. Let them commit. As the Marine convoy crested the last slope and began threading the shallow valley toward their extraction route, Rachel fired. The missile dropped clean from the wing pod, angled low, then curved with a wide, sweeping arc toward the fast-moving target. She didn't follow it with her eyes. She trusted the math. She pulled the Apache back along the ridge, gave herself visual cover, and scanned for any other surprises. The impact came sharp and silent from her seat, just a flash in the distance, then a plume of dust that mushroomed upward and settled over the trail. The lead vehicle disappeared inside it. No secondary movement followed. The others scattered, unsure, pausing just long enough to shift their angle and regroup. It was enough. Rachel took a slow breath, adjusted the trim again, and pulled the bird around for one final sweep over the convoy's retreat. Below, she could see the Marines driving hard, 2 MRAPs sagging slightly under the weight of wounded and gear. The trail was rough, uneven. Every bounce risked more injury. But they were moving. They were out of the bottleneck and into open desert. A new voice came over the net. Different tone, younger, tense. Gunship, whoever you are, we've got eyes on you. Keep that overhead. That's the only reason we're still upright. Rachel didn't answer right away. She watched the remaining enemy vehicles hesitate again. This time, without direction. Their lead was gone. Dust clouded their line of sight. She pulled the Apache in a slow orbit, high enough to keep safe from small arms, but low enough to remind them she was still here. She finally keyed her mic. Stay on that heading. Do not stop. I've got your flank. Another voice, clearer and older, likely Reaper Actual, broke in. Gunship. We're not asking for miracles. Just a little more time. Rachel checked her fuel again. The gauge dipped below the last quarter. Return range was still viable, but barely. She'd have to climb within 5 minutes or she'd lose her power margin for emergency recovery. Her jaw tightened slightly as she checked her path back to base. The route was clean for now, but nothing stayed clean for long. She needed to stretch every last second she had before she pulled away. Copy, she said. You've got it. The Apache drifted back above the Marine column, hovering for a full 10 seconds as the vehicles crawled beneath her. Her shadow stretched long and wide, cast flat across the ravine walls. The reticle that had once blinked with missile queue was now empty. Her chain gun sat warm, still functional, but reduced. She counted the ammo rounds left in her head and ignored the temperature warning. From above, the desert had gone quiet again. No more obvious threats, no movement on the horizon. But Rachel didn't trust silence. She kept her eyes open, scanning every ridge, every rise of terrain that could hide one more threat. She waited until the final marine vehicle cleared the valley and began pushing toward open road before she finally allowed herself to pivot the aircraft west. Stork was still breathing. The Apache still responded. The convoy was moving. All things considered, that was enough. The third wave came over the ridgeline in the last light of afternoon, their silhouettes backlit by the descending sun. 5 vehicles again, possibly more, spaced with enough discipline to suggest coordination, not desperation. Rachel saw the column as it rounded the crest and began its descent down the slope, angled perfectly to cut off the Marine's final leg. No missiles left, no standoff strike capability. All she had left was the chain gun and altitude she couldn't afford to lose. She didn't hesitate. The Apache dropped low again, so close to the ground that dust curled around the skids as she pushed into a shallow strafe run. Her hands moved with absolute control, the kind that only came from repetition and silence. She picked the front vehicle first. A short, clean burst walked across its hood and windshield, then into the axle. The truck pitched forward, caught the edge of a dry trench, and rolled. She pivoted hard, carving a slow S pattern to avoid the inbound fire. Tracer rounds clipped the sky around her, none finding purchase. But the volume was growing. The gunner in the second vehicle fired wildly. Rachel ignored him. She wasn't aiming to destroy the whole line, just to stop its motion. As she reached the rear of the convoy, she raked another burst low across the final truck's tires and engine compartment. It stalled instantly, smoke pouring from the hood. The middle vehicles were trapped, engines revved, trying to reverse or push through the sudden wreckage. But there was nowhere to go. The convoy was boxed in between the flame and steel. Rachel climbed just enough to reset her path, then circled wide to confirm the trap held. Through her HUD, the image stuttered for a moment, then stabilized. Her chain gun was low, and she could feel the Apache starting to protest with every movement. The left engine temperature light was flashing yellow. Vibration increased with every correction. Fuel was lower than she liked. The aircraft wasn't dying. Not yet. But it was talking back now. A voice came over the radio Reaper actual, tone ragged but solid. "Gunship. We're mobile. Full convoys on the move. Exiting West Valley now." Another voice, quieter, followed. "We saw that run. You stopped them cold." Rachel didn't respond right away. She banked again, climbed slowly to a safer altitude, and watched the blocked enemy vehicles vanish in dust. No more pursuit. No new threats visible. No remaining weapons left to fire. Her eyes scanned the edge of the battlefield one more time, checking for anything missed. There was nothing. Just scattered movement, smoke, and silence. The cockpit was warmer now. Systems warnings flashed in sequence. Left engine temperature climbed past tolerance. Oil pressure warning blinked red. Rotor speed slightly low. Vibration in the pedals made her calves ache. She knew the feeling. The aircraft could still make it home, but barely. Stork didn't speak. He was breathing, eyes closed. Blood dried against his shoulder harness. His chest moved steady. Rachel checked once, then returned her eyes to the horizon. She turned the Apache southwest, setting a bearing toward base. It wasn't far. 10 minutes with no interruptions. Less if she kept power conservative and altitude steady. Smoke from the damaged nose section streaked behind her. It caught the sun just right, casting a long shadow over the rocks below. Another voice came through the net. Casual now, almost tired. "Gunship. We're clear. Full column accounted for. We owe you." Rachel keyed her mic, the tone in her voice unchanged. "Copy. Stay west of the riverbed. Avoid secondary ridgeline. It's still hot. Understood. That was it. No further orders. No mission update. The net went quiet again, leaving only the rhythmic hum of the aircraft's mechanical systems, half functional and running on worn precision. Her display dimmed briefly, then reset. She adjusted the lighting to reduce glare. Not that it mattered now. The work was done. The Apache flew slower now, groaning slightly in the tail section. Her left hand stayed tight on the cyclic while her right kept the torque in check. Every small adjustment required double the input. The aircraft wasn't fighting her. It was simply exhausted. The terrain ahead shimmered under the weight of the setting sun. The ridgelines flattened out as the elevation dropped toward the valley floor, and the thin silver thread of the return route shimmered in the dust. Rachel kept her eyes forward, the warning light still dancing quietly across her screen. They had done their job. The Marines were moving. The mission was complete. She said nothing more. She didn't check in with command. There was no need to explain what she already knew. She felt it in the airframe, in her arms, in the silence that now filled the space where missiles had flown and cannon bursts had rolled like thunder. She wasn't flying clean. She was limping home. Still, the aircraft flew. Smoke trailed behind her like a flag in slow motion, dark against the orange sky. Below, the dust settled around broken vehicles that would never move again. Ahead, the desert stretched quiet, waiting for the last flight to finish. Rachel adjusted the trim again. The vibration was worse now. Engine temperature climbed past warning into caution. Her voice didn't change. "Copy," she said. "I'm out." The Apache came in heavy, dragging its own weight through the final descent like it had held itself together just long enough to get home. Landing skids slammed the tarmac harder than Rachel liked, but they held. Smoke curled from the scorched cowling near the left engine, rising in tight spirals into the early evening air. As soon as the rotors began to wind down, ground crew sprinted in with fire extinguishers and stretchers. One reached up and opened the canopy as medics climbed onto the skid rail to pull Stork out first. Rachel stayed in her seat a moment longer. Systems were powering down one by one, the lights across her dash dimming like tired eyes. She didn't speak, didn't remove her gloves until both boots were on the ground. When she stepped off the bird, the hangar bay was already filling with heat and motion, but none of it touched her. She stood just outside the circle of activity, helmet tucked under one arm, listening without comment as the medics confirmed Stork's condition. Stable, blood loss, controlled, transport, inbound. He was going to be fine. A lieutenant from command intercepted her on the edge of the flight line. His boots were clean, his tone careful. "We got the report from Reaper Actual. You bought them time. We thought we'd lose them." Rachel didn't answer right away. She looked past him to where the ground crew was hosing down the Apache's side. Burn marks, scoring along the rotor mast, holes in the forward cowling where the shrapnel had punched through. She nodded once. "Aircraft's down 2 systems," she said. "Needs a full inspection before it flies again." The lieutenant paused, then just said, "Understood." The rest of the debrief came quickly. A checklist of confirmations, short acknowledgments, no ceremony. The Marines were clear, all packages secured. Convoy had crossed into the green zone 20 minutes earlier. No further contact. Extraction had gone exactly as planned on paper. Later, after the gear was turned in and the hangar lights dimmed, Rachel walked the flight line alone. The space was quiet again, filled with the static heat of machines cooling down. The air smelled like jet fuel and scorched insulation, the scent of hours that couldn't be put back. She found the Apache still parked near the bay doors, marked for inspection. One of the maintenance crew had left a stepladder beside it. She didn't climb up. She didn't need to. Her hand rose to the edge of the fuselage and found the groove near the forward plate. Just a shallow trench carved by a passing round. A reminder of how close everything had been. The radio near the workbench crackled once. A Marine's voice came through, low and almost hesitant. "That pilot? We owe her." Rachel said nothing. She pressed her hand once against the metal skin of the aircraft, then stepped back. "They got out?" That's all that counts.